Gavin Andresen had his keys revoked from the Bitcoin Core repo by a man named Vladimir van der Laan, who is supported by the MIT Digital Currency Initiative, which received its money from a company called Digital Garage, which received all of its money from everyone's favorite pedophile, Jeffrey Epstein.
What?
Yes.
So run that back. Say that again, please.
Vladimir van der Laan has contributed more code to Bitcoin Core than any other developer.
Hello, ladies and gents. Welcome to CJTV. Today I have a very special guest, Kurt Wuckert. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing it right. He's going to be dropping some truth bombs. Hello, Kurt. Thank you very much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Kurt, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yep. So I'm an old school Bitcoiner. I got involved in 2012. The first Bitcoin I received was a payment for a small printing job. So for me, Bitcoin was always a means of exchange. Somebody was told me it was video game money. So I was like, yeah, sure, what the heck, you know? Well, that got me started down the rabbit hole. I ended up doing, I was mining a bit in 2013 and 14 until ASICs completely took over at that point. I wasn't particularly competitive anymore, so I got out of that. I got into the development space a little bit. I've also worked in cybersecurity for a number of years. So I was a white hat red teamer, meaning it's my job to manage social engineering campaigns for paying clients. So we would have the company CTO typically would pay us to hack their giant company. So I have a lot of experience working with white hat hackers and basically taking down on the good guys side, but taking down some of the biggest hedge funds, financial firms, large retailers, that kind of thing. I've been involved in Bitcoin almost nonstop. I've always had my feet in the game. I was a founder of Crypto Traders Pro, which started in late 2016 as a way to teach people how to trade, how to manage their portfolio as well. I've always been a big blocker. So amid the scaling wars, I was always on the side of Bitcoin XT and Bitcoin Unlimited. I ended up being a Bitcoin Cash supporter. And then when that got wild, I became a Bitcoin SV supporter as well. We'll get into that a bit later. But now I am full-time as the chief Bitcoin historian at CoinGeek.com. So I'm a full-time researcher on the history of Bitcoin and applying it to the future. And I also do a whole bunch of other stuff with CoinGeek as well. So I host my own podcast. You can watch me weekly on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time on the CoinGeek weekly live stream. And find me all over the place. I'm everywhere.
Awesome. Kurt, those 2 minutes that I saw where you were talking about MasterCard got me really interested. I thought we need you on. Therefore, in this particular interview, I want to focus on truth. So please, could you literally rip the ass of the fake narrative we have in crypto, expose the puppet masters, who is pulling the strings, who's sponsoring what, and what is actually going on? Pull the curtain back, drop the truth bombs, no mercy.
Sure. All right, you got it. So if you listen to Anthony Pompliano or Michael Saylor or Elon Musk now, they're all, Bitcoin, Bitcoin, Bitcoin. It's decentralized. It's great. It's digital gold. We're going to replace the cash reserves in our companies with Bitcoin because it's going to outperform the dollar over the next decade. Maybe it will. They might be right. However, that's not really what Bitcoin was designed to do. If you go back and look at the Bitcoin white paper and look at any of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of messages that Satoshi said publicly to everybody, he talked to all these people that are involved in the conversation today. But I mean, you can see conversations with him talking to guys like Dan Larimer from EOS or even guys like Jeff Garzik and tons of conversation with Mike Hearn, Gavin Andresen, and a lot of the old school Bitcoin people answering questions as to what Bitcoin is for. Well, from 2008 to late 2010, Satoshi just continued to tell people, hey, you can bootstrap an email service right on top of Bitcoin, or you can run an adult website right on top of Bitcoin. You can tokenize payments. You can do all this cool stuff. And people just kept arguing with him. Oh, no. Everybody's got to run a node and it's got to be more secure and it's got to be all these things. And Satoshi just keeps telling people, hey, why is this so unclear to you? Why do you keep trying to turn it into something else? We have these failed experiments from the late 90s into the early 2000s. We got eCash, DigiCash, DigiGold, eGold, all these things from David Chaum and Nick Szabo and some of these other cypherpunk guys. And he keeps saying, there's a reason you guys continue to fail, and it's because you keep thinking that this decentralized meme is the thing that makes money valuable. And in part, it is. Distribution matters. He was also very clear about the need to fight the central banks because the central banks will debase the currency. But these were side notes to Bitcoin. Satoshi was very clear that Bitcoin was an efficient payment system. Now, all of a sudden, in late 2010 and early 2011, Satoshi very clearly got very frustrated with the fact that nobody understood what the hell he was talking about, and he wrote his last message to the lead developer, Gavin Andreessen, at the time, and basically saying, like, in private, hey, I'm just gonna hand this off to you at this point. And then and said, stop talking about pirate money. Stop being I don't want to be the shadowy figure. Like, I shouldn't be a shadowy figure, and Bitcoin shouldn't be a shadowy thing. It is a business tool. It is a tool meant to shine a light in the darkness, reduce payment friction, and increase data integrity around the world. Well, Satoshi didn't exactly disappear. It looks more like he was robbed. So all of a sudden, Bitcoin.org got taken over. The Bitcoin repo, which was on a centralized repo called SourceForge, was copy and pasted over to GitHub and turned into a community project. The copyright and license that were in the name of Satoshi Nakamoto were wiped out. That one of the first things they did was change the copyright to the Bitcoin Core developers. So they wrote Satoshi off of his own copyright without permission, without payment, without anything. So they stole the project and they stole the website, and then they took over Reddit, where most of the conversation was happening at the time. And then they created a new website called Bitcoin Talk, which copy and pasted all of the information from Bitcoin.org, which Satoshi controlled, and they turned it into this forum that they controlled. And then they became the experts and said, hey, everyone needs to run their own node. We need to keep the 1 megabyte block size forever. We need to do all these things. You need to trust us. We're this brilliant intelligentsia. Satoshi didn't know what he was doing. And if you trust us, we're going to send you to the moon. Well, that's when stuff started to get weird. 2011, 2012, a character named John Dillon showed up. A lot of people don't know this story, but John Dillon introduced himself in public forum as a secret agent of sorts. He said, hey, I'm an agent with the government. You need to make sure that Bitcoin keeps its 1 megabyte blocks forever and blah, blah, blah. And he paid a guy named Peter Todd, who is today an infamous Bitcoin Core developer, paid him to introduce RBF, replace by fee, which is a protocol change to Bitcoin. And what it does is, if you broadcast a transaction with a low fee, so maybe even an intentionally low fee so that it does not get into a block quickly, it just sits in the mempool, maybe forever, depending on the fee that you put on it. And then once it's been broadcast, you can go back and you can rebroadcast that transaction with a higher fee and send it to a different wallet. Now, it was done this way as an idea to move coins that, the fee is too low, you've screwed up, you've made a mistake, this solves this problem. But in reality, it allows you to double spend your own coins back. So it's a giant fundamental change to the Bitcoin protocol. And it was paid for by a guy who was a self-ascribed Secret Service agent, or some kind of secret agent, paying a Bitcoin Core developer to act as a sort of fiduciary over the code and completely change Bitcoin. Now, from there, things snowballed. They shut off most of the script stack in Bitcoin. They shut off the whole working computer that was built on top in like a virtual machine, basically on top of Bitcoin. Like, kill that, kill a bunch of stuff, make Bitcoin only good for very slow, expensive, but unstoppable transactions, and we don't need it for anything else. Then all of a sudden in 2015, after years of debate about the roadmap, a company called Blockstream was formed. Blockstream they get a lot of heat for being the head of the dragon, but they're not the head of the dragon. They're a puppet too. But Blockstream came out looking for money. They started asking, hey, we want to raise money. We would like a Series A, a seed round, whatever, and we want to be professional Bitcoin developers. Well, a bunch of venture capitalists and stuff looked at it and said, well, how do you make money? There's no profit in this. So you're not going to make any money doing any of this. So a lot of people said no. In fact, some venture capitalists that I know in real life looked at it and said, why would you do this? This doesn't make any sense. Well, then all of a sudden they get a $55 million payment from a company called AXA Insurance, which if you're in Europe, there's AXA branches all over the place. They're a major European financial institution, and they have a ventures arm. Curiously, at the time, the CEO of AXA is a guy named Henri de Castries. Henri de Castries is a French multi-billionaire. He's also the president, or he was the president at the time, of the Bilderberg Group, which, if anybody reads about conspiracy news or any of that, the Bilderberg Group is basically the shadiest, shadowiest group of like central banking
kings, queens,
people. Kings and yeah, it's the CEOs of the major companies. Yeah. It's the heads of the major states of the world. It's large media CEOs.
1% of the 1%, basically.
Yes, they're it, and they meet behind closed doors. No media allowed. No reporting leaks out ever. And they have this secret meeting once a year to plan what the world's going to look like the next year. There's giant protests outside of the Bilderberg Group every year because why the hell are they allowed to have this private meeting without any media coverage or any, not even minutes kept or anything? And so these people are planning the entire world, and not just a member. This is Henri de Castries is not just a member. He was the president of the Bilderberg Group. Paid $55 million to help found this company Blockstream to professionalize Bitcoin developers. So now you take these poor coders, software guys, and say, hey, now you're making a few $100,000 a year to develop what I want on Bitcoin. Who's going to debate with you as the professional developer? They like to say, well, we make the software and people choose to run it. Well, I mean, who's going to fight, right? Who's going to argue? Because they control this narrative. Now, it's not just Blockstream. If you look at who else is involved in this, so Blockstream also has ties to Digital Currency Group and Blockchain Capital and Digital Garage. These are all other big venture capital groups. And if you go one step up, they all have very close connections to MasterCard, which I mentioned on my live stream last week.
Yeah.
So now we have the giant central banking cabal and MasterCard all trying to steer heavily. I mean, they're not just suggesting. It's not like they just are making suggestions on Twitter like, hey, this is what Bitcoin should look like. They're saying, let's put some money together. Let's pay every single developer to do whatever it is we want. And then from there, all of a sudden, Bitcoin can't scale. Bitcoin can't do any of these things unless you use Lightning Labs technology, which again is another company owned by Digital Currency Group and MasterCard. And then you can also use Coinbase and just use your credit card or your debit card from Coinbase, which again, Coinbase is also owned by Digital Currency Group, MasterCard, same people. So all of a sudden, you've got this walled garden of things that, under the guise of decentralization, there's just pennies going to MasterCard all the time. And so what they've done is they said, we're just going to turn this into a payment vehicle. It's just a payment rail that puts money in our pockets. And we're going to tell people that they're revolutionaries. This is going to change the world. You're revolutionaries. You're cypherpunks. You're super cool here. And you're not. You are using a controlled protocol that was managed by paid developers who are bolstered by paid media. Look at who owns Cointelegraph, CoinDesk, Bitcoinist, all of these other publications. Ooh. So it goes right up the same chain, goes right up to MasterCard, Digital Currency Group. Look at Grayscale Investments. Look at these companies. Here's what's really cool. If you want people to take a look, go to Digital Currency Group. I believe it's dcg.com/portfolio.
I was going to say, some people are going to say, okay, Kurt, show us some proof. Where can we see this? Please carry on.
Yeah. Just Google it. Google Digital Currency Group portfolio. The first page that comes up on Google will show you every single property owned by Digital Currency Group. And it's everybody. It's every exchange you use. It's every wallet you use. It's every developer group. It's all the interconnected liquidity providers. It's everybody from BitGo and Fireblocks that are doing big custody for the big groups. It's all the exchanges. It's Kraken, it's Coinbase, it's Abra Wallet. I mean, it's hundreds. It's 99% of the brands that you see in the crypto space are all controlled by a giant venture capital group that is itself a giant partner in MasterCard.
So basically, sorry to interrupt, 99% of the people in crypto think that they are revolutionaries. They think that crypto is anti-bank. They think they stepped outside the system, whereas nothing could be further from the truth. They are being conned. In fact, they are playing right into the hands of MasterCard, of Fed Reserve, of the Bilderbergers.
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny because it's also the influencers, and it started in places like Reddit, and it started when Bitcoin.org got taken over and moved to Bitcoin Talk. Like, it's little things, and these are the little things where you're like, well, it's the internet. This is just trolling. But I mean, you and I, there were people trolling you for saying that I was going to be on your show today. All of a sudden, you get these cartoons on Twitter saying, "Oh, haha, this is going to be stupid. What an idiot!" And it's like, okay, well, who are you? What is this account? Why is there always, when you start to mention where their money comes from, all of a sudden there's these anonymous cartoons on Twitter and everybody else that start saying, yeah, they start to pick you apart. They start, calling me a scammer and all these things. I'm not selling anything. I'm a historian. So I point these things out, and this is what's called in technology, this is called a Sybil Attack. What a Sybil Attack is when people are pretending to be one thing, but they're actually all working for a malicious actor. And that malicious actor, in my opinion, I think it's very clear. Like, I don't think that it's even really debatable that MasterCard and the central banking interests are pulling the puppet strings of basically the entire crypto space. And like you said, we're acting like we're anti-bank, we're this revolutionary group, and meet the new boss, same as the old boss, unfortunately.
In regards to influencers, I've been doing a little bit of research. Now, I know that my channel is shadow banned, it's blatant. I've looked at forums, I've looked at social media, managers, promoters, I looked at the numbers, and certain influencers, I believe, in the space, this is where they get approached by hedge funds and say, look, we'll give you money, we'll promote your channel, it'll be one of the biggest in the space. However, you can't talk about this, and that. Instead, focus on this. You'll be making money. You will be the biggest channel. And I believe 1, 2, or 3 influencers, this is what's happening to them, because other influencers who are exposing such information as yourself are being gatekept, or should I say, being stopped from expanding your influence, in my opinion, according to what I've seen.
I agree completely. And anyone that wants to debate that, go listen. The number one podcast in the Bitcoin space is Peter McCormick's What Bitcoin Did podcast. Peter's a very talented broadcaster. He really is. He's very good on the microphone. He and I have had a very contentious relationship for a very long time. He doesn't like me. I did a debate with him on the Hotep Jesus podcast about a year or so ago. And Peter's an all right guy. He's just a guy. But if you pay attention, every time his show starts, he says, I'd like to thank Kraken, and he starts rattling off who's sponsoring the show. And they're the same people that I've been talking about here. So to say that Peter's this independent, curious everyman who just wants to learn about Bitcoin is completely disingenuous. And you hear it when you listen to who sponsors the show. And you have to do the same thing when you listen to any show. If you put on the Joe Rogan podcast, he's going to say the same thing. He's going to say, hey, thanks to Cash App, thanks to this, beef jerky company or whoever else is sponsoring him now. And you have to realize that when somebody writes you a check, that there's things that come with that it's, hey, you're going to push Cash App, and Cash App only sells BTC, and that's Bitcoin, and that's your narrative, Joe. And who's Joe to even question? He doesn't know. He's not the bad guy. This is this compartmentalization where you just say, okay, whoever's paying my bill, BTC's the big one, Cash App's the same, that's all well and good. We're good.
I've only ever heard Peter McCormack once, and that's when I've listened to the interview he had with Craig Wright, and it was like listening to a son trying to debate his dad or even granddad. I mean, there's just different levels.
Absolutely. And Craig's a contentious fellow. A lot of people don't like Craig. I've worked... I've worked, I guess casually isn't the right word, but I don't have a direct connection to Craig. I actually talk to him very seldomly. But I do work for CoinGeek, which is a Calvin Ayre property. And some people will say the same thing about me. Like, well, Kurt works for Calvin Ayre, and Calvin Ayre is a BSV shill, and that's why Kurt talks about BSV. And I'd like to clear that up for anybody that wants to debate on that point by stating that I have a very long history of always supporting the biggest block implementation of Bitcoin. So in 2015, I was a supporter of Bitcoin Classic and Bitcoin XT, who were big advocates for moving the block size up to 2 megabytes. When Bitcoin ABC came out in 2017, I supported Bitcoin ABC to move up to 8 megabytes, and that's what forced the Bitcoin Cash split and all of that. So I was a Bitcoin Casher. And then as soon as the debates happened between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV, I was very much on the Bitcoin SV side. Like, hey, let's raise the block size limit to 128 megabytes. Let's do that. This is what we should do. And I should point out that at the time, I was hosting a Bitcoin.com sponsored meetup. And I was also in negotiation to host a podcast on Bitcoin.com about Bitcoin Cash. So I had every incentive to be a Bitcoin Casher. And when the split happened, I said, nope, absolutely not. Bitcoin SV is the way to go. It's the biggest block Bitcoin. This can change the world. And that's the direction I'm going. So good luck, Bitcoin.com. Good luck, Bitcoin Cash. That's the direction I'm going. And then I was independent. I was independent until November of 2020. I just signed on to work at CoinGeek as a journalist and historian just for a little less than 4 months ago at this point. So I make my own decisions.
What is the end game for the Puppeteers? It's basically they subverted the space, they hijacked Bitcoin, they are sponsoring like 90% of the projects, if not more, in a space. What's the end goal? I mean, I can kind of sum it up, but in your own words.
I think if you look at it, it's kind of like when you patent something in order to stop it from killing your business model, right? So like a big drug company, for example, if you're making a lot of money selling chemotherapy, and this is something that a lot of anti-pharmaceutical people will talk about is, they're hiding the cure, right? And maybe they are, because we know that they will patent certain things that are much, much cheaper than the chemotherapy, and they'll shelve them. So if you could cure cancer for $1, well, you'd want to patent that cure and not sell that cure because you're selling something that costs $20,000 a month. So if you try to sell the thing that's $1, well, you go out of business. So there's a business incentive to hold back the best technology if it's not profitable. So that's really truly what I think it is. Bitcoin, allowed to scale with no limits anywhere, completely replaces the entire fiat economy. It replaces not just MasterCard, it replaces the banking system. It replaces MoneyGram and Western Union. It replaces all global remittance. All of that goes away, and it gets replaced with something that is practically free. It's perceptibly free to the user. It's frictionless. It works every single time, and then you actually own the ability to do that. I mean, right now, if I were to try to wire money to you, you're in Great Britain, right?
Yeah.
You're in the UK. So if I were to try to wire you money, it'd probably take a week to get there. Well, why the hell should it take a week to get there? I mean, like we're having a video chat right now. So, why can't we stream money the same way that we stream video data? Well, the technology's there. And people will say, well, Visa and these people can do it faster. And that's total crap. Visa is technology from like the 70s and 80s, and it hasn't been upgraded. It's total bullshit. Bitcoin is 2008 technology. It's exponentially faster and more efficient than Visa and MasterCard. And that's the real problem. They looked at it and said, ooh, this takes down trillions and trillions of dollars of our empire, and that's no good. So we need
money, but it's also power itself.
Yes, money is power. Money is a measuring stick for power. So if you're a powerful person, you can measure that in threats, but threats aren't as good. If you have money in social engineering, you just get people to think you're the good guy, and then you don't need to pretend to be anything. Like you get to be the master of the universe, and people will thank you for it. and that's the path they took. But that's the path they've taken on everything. This is like Bernays and Saul Alinsky and these people. Like it's social engineering. If you can make the cattle desire to come home every night, you don't need to have fences, right? Yeah. And that's
sorry, just for the viewers, I'd like to clarify right now, Bitcoin SV is the Bitcoin that was mentioned, described exactly in the white paper in 2008. Kurt, if you'd like to expand on that.
Absolutely. Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer electronic cash system.
Cash,
meaning
not storage.
Cash.
Yeah.
Right. The words decentralized aren't mentioned in the white paper. There's no mention of gold or digital gold or savings or any of these things. If you read the introduction of the Bitcoin white paper, which should take
cash. Yeah.
It should take somebody 45 to 90 seconds to read the introduction. And he explains commerce on the internet is inefficient because the fees of centralized payments make it impractical to do micropayments business. So who's he talking about in 2008? That's credit cards, debit cards, and PayPal. Those were the only ways to do commerce on the internet. And their fees were too high. That's what he said in the white paper. So here's Bitcoin to solve the fee problem of transacting. I believe the phrase he used was small, casual payments on the internet. That's what he was trying to solve with Bitcoin. So the notion that it's this asymmetric savings account that needs to be, bulletproof against confiscation, none of that was discussed. None of that was discussed in the white paper at all. He explains very simply a system that allows people like me and you to do business across the ocean. It allows me to do business with somebody in North Korea as easily as I can do business with somebody in North Carolina. And what that does is it breaks down borders. It breaks down these massive walled gardens, these siloed, frankly, evil economies that are controlled by people that pull everyone's puppet strings with social engineering.
Okay. I have read through your tweets. It seems that Craig did sign the key on four separate occasions, but it had dire consequences for him. Can you tell us about that, please? Yes.
So Craig Wright did not want to be a public person. When Satoshi Nakamoto went away in 2010 and 2011, I don't think he wanted to go away. I think he was pushed into hiding. A lot of this is going to come out in the next year or so. I've signed an NDA because I'm working on a documentary to tell the entire story alongside other people from CoinGeek. But when he came back, he came back not under his own will. He was doxxed by Wired Magazine and Gizmodo and Vice and the BBC. They all colluded to say, this man Satoshi Nakamoto, we found him. It's, let's get him on the air here. Well, he was clearly very uncomfortable with that. And then when he showed up, when they asked him who he is and how they know, all this stuff, well, he started talking about how Bitcoin has gone off the path that it needed to be on, that it needs to scale on chain, that it needs to look the way that BSV looks today. Well, then instantly, all the small blockers, the people that are controlled by MasterCard, they said, he's the bad guy. There's no way he's Satoshi. He can't be. He can't possibly be. So Craig took a half step back. And he reached out to the lead developer of Bitcoin Core, which is Gavin Andreessen. He reached out to the head of the Bitcoin Foundation, a guy named John Matonis. And he reached out to probably the greatest living cryptographer, a man named Ian Grigg. Now, Ian Grigg created the technology that makes Bitcoin possible. This is triple entry accounting. This is the Ricardian contract. These are he made them computer. I'm trying to think the right way to put this. He computerized a lot of old accounting principles and turned them into math that made them applicable to computer science. So Ian Grigg is like absolutely a math code cryptography ninja. He could be the greatest living coder and greatest living like theoretical cryptographer. He's incredible. Well, he reached out to him and said, hey, Ian, like I want to prove to you that I'm Satoshi because who could argue with you? Now, what the plan was initially is I'm going to show myself to very important people in the Bitcoin space, so I have a little bit of people to back me up. Yeah. And then once that's been done, we'll roll out the rest. He wanted to do a big public signing on the media and the BBC. Yeah. Well, he signed for Gavin. Gavin came out in public and said, "Oh my goodness, there's video of it." He's like, "I just met Satoshi Nakamoto. It's incredible. He reminds me of the man that I used to email with a few years ago, and he's a little prickly, but that's how he was." And ha ha ha. Well, within that week, Gavin Andresen had his keys revoked from the Bitcoin Core repo by a man named Vladimir van der Laan, who is supported by the MIT Digital Currency Initiative, which received its money from a company called Digital Garage, which received all of its money from everyone's favorite pedophile, Jeffrey Epstein.
What?
Yes.
So run that back. Say that again, please.
Vladimir van der Laan has contributed more code to Bitcoin Core than any other developer. He is under the Digital Currency Initiative at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
Yeah.
They received most of their funding from a company called Digital Garage, a guy named Joi Ito. He's a Japanese man.
Yeah.
And they received that money. They actually got busted for laundering that money from Jeffrey Epstein. So Jeffrey Epstein wanted to launder money into and pay Bitcoin Core developers to do something with the protocol, right? So why would Jeffrey Epstein care? Well, think about who Jeffrey Epstein's connections are again. It's a very
sorry to interrupt. So when Craig says that they don't want transparent money, they want drug money, pedo money, crime money, that's what he means.
At the very least. In fact, this was brought up with Craig, and Craig said Epstein, he's like, all things considered, Epstein's not even that bad. So looking at who he's actually hunting, Epstein, don't get me wrong, real bad guy. Yeah. But he's not the head of the dragon either. He's certainly not the worst. There are people doing much nastier stuff in the world than Jeffrey was. But
the hole just goes so deep.
It sure does. And people are almost completely unaware of it. I mean, why was this not big news, right? Jeffrey Epstein was probably the single largest human trafficker ever taken down in public. I mean, there was the Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself was all over the internet for months. It was huge. Why wasn't it discussed?
Good. Bitfinex USDT, the fact that everyone knows it's a scam and they're allowed to operate, it just makes so much sense now.
Sure does. It's a money laundering tool for criminals. I mean, and the thing is that the criminals and the banks have always been very closely tied. And you'll hear this a little bit when people are like, Bitcoin's used for laundering money. And the response is, well, HSBC was laundering money for the cartels. You hear these responses, right? And it's like, well, yeah, of course they are, because they're the same people that are controlling Bitcoin. This is a side venture. This is an investment for them that if Bitcoin becomes this de facto standard, then they're still just doing business the way they always were. The big banks, the big central banks, all these people, a lot of the people working in there are criminals. They are connected to criminal cartels, and they're laundering money that way. They get busted for it all the time. You just don't hear much about it.
They carry on operating.
Exactly, because they also own the big media in the real world too. That's the thing. The New York Times and CNN, like, these things aren't just owned by a guy. They're owned in part. They're owned in pieces by big financial players. So it's big financial players playing the same game across the entire economy. And that's why Bitcoin is scary. That's why the real Bitcoin, BSV, that's why they need to crush it, because if BSV becomes the most successful thing, it replaces all of them. It replaces the ability to lie, which, people will say like, oh, BSV is a surveillance tool against normal people. Well, there's very little to surveil against me. I would much rather be surveilling the Bilderberg Group and CNN and our own government. And hey, why did did $1 million just go to this wallet from one wallet to another by the Pentagon? We should look into that.
Yeah.
Right. What are they spending it on? And we hear this stuff after the fact. You hear like when the Freedom of Information Act lets out news from 30 years ago, and it's like, wait, hold on. They poisoned a whole town, or they dropped this chemical bomb, or they blew up. The U.S. government, they blew up a neighborhood in Pittsburgh in the 60s because there were bad people there. And it's like, this stuff all gets covered up because the media is like, oh, there was a fire or something. And then it comes out, oh no, the FBI orchestrated it. The FBI killed Martin Luther King. And, they gave a settlement to the King family after the fact, but it was 30 years ago and everybody that did it's already retired or dead.
Go and watch some football. Yeah.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Watch football. There's a new season of something coming on. Like that's what they do. They just feed you something else to pay attention to. And then you don't hear about all these terrible things that are going on because most people are incapable. And then, and they control all the rails of information and money. So it makes it very easy to keep things quiet. And Bitcoin changes all of that too. That's why it's so dangerous for them.
So right now you have BSV, the most shorted and hated coin in the crypto sphere, versus all the other coins out there. Yep. So that in itself to me is validity. I mean, so that crypto narrative right now is don't look at BSV, it's a scam. Craig is a scammer, whereas we have BTC Core here and 8,000 other coins.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and it's funny because it's so obvious, and so many of the people involved are people that think they're independent thinkers too. And that's really the sad thing is people think they're clever, they're getting ahead of things, like, oh, I'm going to get this investment, I'm going to be richer than everybody else, and it's because I know special things, and it's like, no, like there's been E-Trade commercials about Bitcoin for 3 or 4 years now, Robinhood and all these people. Like this is not new stuff that you're getting involved in. Like what would actually be new is being able to communicate on chain, keeping your identity on chain, being unhackable, having all of your data globally available, but also globally secure, having sovereign money that you can spend anywhere on earth and it's the same everywhere, or the ability to make your own special purpose money at will. Like if you wanted to start your own little economy in your local city, just tokenize it. Tokenize Chicago coin, and that can be the money in Chicago. And it can just be fun. It can be like Chuck E. Cheese tokens. Hey, you get a discount if you spend Chicago coin, but it's all built on the largest proof of work. So it's secure. I mean, these things are revolutionary, but nobody's doing them. Nobody's doing business. Nobody's saying, hey, I'm going to make a 10-year plan to disrupt an entire sector of the economy. No, they're only trying to disrupt things like basically Swiss banking. That's the only thing anybody thinks to disrupt now is hey, everyone should have a Swiss bank in their pocket, and then DeFi can grow 16% APR. About
DeFi, you wrote an article. I have about 2 or 3 questions for you. In regards to DeFi, what is your opinion about it?
So DeFi means decentralized finance, right? And this is such a vague term. Like, what the hell does that even mean, right? So DeFi, loosely defined, is just a subset of services that Bitcoin provides to the world. It's decentralized finance. It allows you to enter escrow with people or do peer-to-peer lending. All these things are possible on Bitcoin, and they always were. And what they've done in Ethereum is they've created a bunch of, by a bunch, I mean hundreds or thousands of different protocols that interconnect and say, well, this one's a liquidity protocol, and this one's a synthetic liquidity protocol, and this one's a lending protocol. And they all have their own token, by the way. So we're going to print this token, and you need to transact our token in order to use it, to push it up the stack into the next thing, in order to send it off, to Polkadot or to whatever the next thing is. And so there's all these tokens that get created, and it's money that's printed out of absolutely nowhere. I mean, if you were to spin up, actually, Polkadot's a really good example. Polkadot was not even a top several hundred market cap coin, but they said, hey, we're going to integrate with Ethereum. We're going to be this little corner of the DeFi movement, but you do need to use us in order to use a bunch of the different DeFi tools. Oh, and by the way, here's a bunch of tokens. Buy the token, because when Polkadot gets popular, that token's going to be very valuable too. So they get people embroiled in this sort of casino mindset that, oh, I need to gobble up as much Polkadot as I can. And that's fine. Some people genuinely got rich holding Polkadot coins, and good for them. I'm very happy for the normal people that make a lot of money. But what's actually happening is that Polkadot, which is founded by a Peter Thiel fellow, somebody who was given money by Peter Thiel. So this is Thiel Venture Capital, another Silicon Valley guy who has close connections to MasterCard and some of these other people. So that's who's actually making the most money. If you print 1 billion coins and you circulate, 500,000 of them, well, people get rich on those 500,000. They feel like it's great. Right. They pump the prices, but then you've got the other 1 billion coins. You just printed potentially billions of dollars out of nowhere, and all you had to do for it is put up a website. Polkadot doesn't even work. Like Polkadot right now promises 100,000 transactions a second someday. They've got this whole long roadmap for how it works. Right now, Polkadot's not even good for 1,000 transactions a second, which is a 50th of what can be done on BSV today. And still people are, oh, Polkadot's the revolution, man. And it's like, no, it's made up. It's a meme. It's a nice, cute little pink logo that makes people think that, hey, there's must be like a really great ad agency behind this. This is the future of finance. And it's not. It doesn't work. None of it really works. It works a little bit for a small subset of people, but creating market cap out of nowhere, and billionaire people in San Francisco are cashing it out and putting it to whatever they want. And it's to the detriment of all of us. We could be free. We could be free people. And instead we have, hey, I made 12 grand on Polkadot. Isn't that awesome? Like, yes, that's awesome. Just not as awesome as global freedom.
Well, Kurt, as far as I'm concerned, and I believe you share the view, there is literally nothing that was made ever since the inception of Bitcoin that is greater than the original Bitcoin, which right now is BSV.
Yeah. No, nothing. Nothing comes close. I mean, even the big ones that people talk about that scale really well. I mean, Ethereum's good for 15 transactions a second.
I hate Ethereum.
It has the horsepower of a graphing calculator, and people are acting like this is the future. This is the fundamental layer of the future of finance. Like it can process essentially no data. It's broken at least half a dozen times. Chain splits, major problems. Rollbacks. They had to roll back the chain because they broke it. All the contracts are gameable because the whole thing is a giant interconnected computer, but that's just Ethereum. Ethereum is actually a bad example. It's a good example because there's a lot of market cap there, but the technology is terrible. You can move to something like EOS that's like, really fast and the technology looks great, but it has major governance problems. They've split too, because instead of using proof of work and a scalable network, they've said, okay, we can have 3 layers of governance people and we can let people bicker, and they've created another de facto state that just keeps splitting and having its own little revolutions. And
are there any other altcoins that you would consider worth your time, or are you straight BSV?
I am a BSV maximalist. Like there are some good communities out there. So I don't want to say that everyone is evil, because that's not the case. I actually have very good friends in places like the Dash community or Digibyte, and these are good people. These are people that came out of the Bitcoin scaling war that didn't fight for Bitcoin. They looked at it and said, there's no way that's ever going to work because of all the evil people that took over Bitcoin. So they created stuff like Dash or Digibyte, and there's a bunch of other ones that I think are genuinely honest projects. They tried to solve scaling in their own ways. I think they're wrong, but they're good people and they've done good research, and they're not the bad guys. They just want a blockchain that can scale and can do all the same things. They're just not coming close to what BSV is capable of. But they're good people. I'm happy to share a beer with them or anything else.
I have 2 more questions. Yesterday I was going through Twitter, as I do every day, just to be up to date with all the news, and I see there's an explosion of tokens. There's an explosion of projects on BSV. Could you tell us where BSV is at this moment in time? And can you share anything you'd like the viewers to know about BSV at this moment in time?
I mean, there's so many things. I think the thing that freaks people out is that BSV is not controlled by anybody. People like to point at Craig and Calvin, but they're independent. What's that?
The protocol is locked.
Exactly. The protocol is locked. Everything is opened wide up. There's the only thing that you could do is trim it back, but nobody's going to have that from the BSV economy. So right now there is no protocol roadmap because it can scale. It can do anything you want it to do. It has a complete script stack that you can program any application you can think of. If you can program it on a computer, you can program it on Bitcoin SV, and you can monetize it and you can distribute it around the world. And that's unique. Nobody else has that. And that's why we've seen just this last week, a company called Fabric issued these money button simple Fabric protocol tokens. I printed a Kurt coin this week. I said, you know what? Let's see what this looks like. It took me 30 seconds. I made a Kurt coin, and it works really well. I've sent them to a bunch of people. They don't have any value, but like, okay, I can create very simple bonus points. It took me just a couple of minutes. They're instantly available. They integrate with your money button wallet. And that opens up business opportunities. They're also, just so everybody knows, they're below the dust limit to send. So we're talking like a 10,000th of a penny to transact, and we could transact them globally. I mean, at global scale, we could take on 1 billion people today transacting them, and they would never see a spike in the price. So for people that don't think that has value, I don't know what to tell you. But
by the way, I would also like to clarify, I see certain people, certain influencers saying that smart contracts are not possible on Bitcoin, blah, 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 blah. That it's not Turing complete. Bitcoin is Turing complete. Smart contracts are possible on Bitcoin.
They exist today. So if you look at Bitcoin SV right now, there are smart contracts that are operating all kinds of things. There are whole businesses that exist in the virtual machine that is up in the Turing complete stack on Bitcoin. A good example would be Twetch.
Yeah.
Twetch is
video on that, by the way.
Yeah, I mean it's fantastic. It's first of all it's its own social network, all on chain. Every interaction is a transaction. Everything is monetized. Everything is owned by your private keys. So if you want to create your own Twetch client, or not even call it Twetch, you can call it, Bit Network, and it just interfaces directly with Twetch. Then you can do that too. So you own your keys, you own your data, you own everything. It runs seamlessly. It runs really, really well. But it's also a Twitter client. So if you want to post to Twitter from Twetch all day and monetize your Twitter posts, you have that option too. Plus, you can pay people in the interface. You do all kinds of cool stuff. And it's a really, really great encrypted DM app. So it uses AES encryption and your Bitcoin keys to be able to transact conversations like you would on Keybase. But it's more secure than Keybase because it's distributed over Bitcoin instead of wherever the Keybase servers are. So it's incredible. And that's just one example of a business that you can build on Bitcoin using all of the unique properties there. But from a smart contract standpoint, there are so many projects right now. I talked to the guys from Bitcoin Computer the other day. Yeah. I talked to the guys from Bitcoin Computer yesterday. This is a guy named Clemens Lay. And he was one of the first people. He's a Berkeley, I believe he's a Berkeley PhD in computer science. He came out probably 3 or 4 years ago and he supported Craig Wright. And he's like, no, he's right. Bitcoin is Turing complete. And here's why. And it has something to do with looping scripts. I'm not going to bore everybody with the computer science aspect of Turing completeness. But what Turing completeness means is that it's a computer. It means it can do a computation to run a program. And it does that today. These are happening right now. They call this the game of life, is a Turing complete game that proves the Turing completeness of a system. It's like a testing tool. What's running right now in Bitcoin script? So, people can say, well, it's not technically Turing complete for this reason or that, but okay, well, there are Turing complete programs running in it right now. So just because it doesn't compute in your theory doesn't mean that it's not happening right now in reality. So let's have a more valuable conversation then.
And by the way, there's a question as in, okay, why is everything pumping apart from BSV? And the simple answer is because BSV is not only not manipulated, but it's suppressed.
Yep. So the money is fake. And we know this. People know that the fiat money is fake, right? The Federal Reserve, the US government, Donald Trump printed like 20% of the entire circulating dollar supply was printed in 2020. So you can print money out of nowhere. That's terrible. But you can also print Tether out of nowhere because there's been no audit. And the New York Attorney General's been trying to track down the Tether people for years now. They've issued them subpoenas and turnover orders, and they just keep playing patty cake with it. And the reason is because, well, if you have a money printer, you can make anything happen. Yeah. I mean, imagine that, right? I mean, imagine being a really good counterfeiter. Like if you could counterfeit money and do whatever you want with your life, how quickly you're going to be like, okay, here's my books, here's what I did wrong. Like, no, you can print enough money to pay lawyers forever to just keep kicking this down the road.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what's happening. So they print Tether. The books are all private. So like Binance, for example, like those transactions aren't on chain. The only people that see the actual trades are the people at Binance. So you get market makers. It's like a dozen people worldwide, market makers that will trade back and forth to each other to create volume. They have fake money to do it, so they can do whatever the hell they want. And if you need money to cover your short interest to just keep paying to keep BSV shorted, well, that's easy too. You just keep printing more Tether and keep throwing it on the book. So you can hold Bitcoin SV down forever if Tether's in control of everything and if there is an actual business occurring on chain. So I think it's actually incredible that BSV, while it has underperformed a lot of the market, has continued to gain against the dollar because there are actual people buying it. And the sell side liquidity.
Over 30,000 users on Twitch alone.
Yep. Well, and the big commercial things are coming too. So there's a lot of stuff going on where people are looking at data integrity solutions, like your healthcare records, for example. There's 3 major projects right now that are looking at they do about 1 terabyte of data each per day in centralized servers. It's not going to Bitcoin today. And they are actively working with Bitcoin SV related businesses on putting that on the public ledger, which allows people to own their data. Like, you don't own your data if it's on somebody else's server, but you do own your data when you own the private keys to it across a public ledger. So we're talking about something like 3 terabytes of data per day that will be pushed across the BSV network, which makes it much more profitable to mine. And when it's more profitable to mine, then BTC miners start saying, why am I not making more money by mining BSV? Well, and that's when the dominoes start to fall. But this work is being done. But I want to encourage everybody, and I always encourage people, get out there and do the work yourself. If you have a business idea, just get out there and get it done. A lot of people reach out to me and I connect them with developers to get their ideas pushed out. So by all means, send me a DM. You can find me at Kurt Wuckert Jr. on Twitter. I'm happy to connect you with the right people and get this stuff rolling. So be your own business.
Ladies and gents, I hope after this interview, you will actually look into BSV, because Kurt over here dropped some knowledge that even I wasn't aware of. I mean, wow. Kurt, I would like to have you back some days. Is there like a last bit of information, conclusion that you want to leave the viewers with?
I think the most important thing is to remember that we're powerful. We're powerful as individuals and we're powerful as a group. But the big old world money are very, very good at making you feel powerful even when you're not. And I think it's very important to take a step back and ask yourself, what am I being incentivized to do? Like, what am I being pushed toward? Who benefits from my next decision, my next season of behavior? And the more you do that, the more you see that it always goes up to the same people. It always just goes up the chain to the people that pull the strings of finance and government. And these are bad things. Now, the systems are not bad. The systems can be good, but they need to have better incentives. We need to be more powerful. We need to have more voluntary relationships with the controllers of media, because their power comes down as our power goes up. And then we have relationships that are more valuable. And those things are really only possible if we can all agree on a single source of the truth. And that if we can see the work that we're doing, if you take bad things out of the dark and you shine a light on them, it forces the bad people to be good. And we can do this, but the way to do that is you have to lead the way. Like, you need to get out there and do the work. You need to build the business that utilizes the reduced payment friction or the increased data integrity of Bitcoin SV. And the cool thing is that rather than making 12 grand on Polkadot, well, you can create a business that is paying you micropayments 24/7 for the rest of your life. We're talking about residual income by creating a big business that makes you potentially one of the richest people in the world over the next generation. Business is way more powerful than speculation. And right now it's 99% speculation going on, and that can't last forever. So my last thought is that the crypto economy has been almost entirely about absorbing value. But value needs to be created in order for it to be absorbed. And whoever figures out the best way to create value with Bitcoin SV truly is going to be, I mean, you're going to be a king. You're going to be a space lord intergalactic emperor if you can figure out how to create value with this ledger. And the cool thing is you won't be a bad guy, because Bitcoin only rewards people who are truly great at cooperating. So it will make good people powerful people, and it will make powerful people more good. That's it. That's the interview.
Kurt, thank you very much. Ladies and gents, follow Kurt on Twitter. Follow CoinGeek as well. Do some research on BSV. I hope this was an eye-opener, because I thought I knew a lot, but it was an eye-opener for me too. Kurt, thank you very much. I will upload this today and let's get the ball rolling, and hopefully I'll be back soon.
Love it. Thanks for having me on. I'd be happy to come back anytime.
Before you choose the blue or the red pill, please press that subscribe and bell button. do like, share and comment, because it helps me out immensely with the YouTube algorithm, and the money that I generate off this channel goes towards paying the bills, coffee, cat food and creating more content. Thank you.